blaze. I saw flames from the side of the stage, and the fire brigade comes in a couple of days. Until then, we got nothing to say and nothing to know, but something to drink and maybe something to smoke. Let it go until our roads are changed, singing we found love in a local rave. No, I don't really know what I'm supposed to say, but I can just figure it out, then hope and pray. I told her my name, I said it's nice to meet you. Then she handed me a bottle of water filled with tequila. I already know she's a keeper, just from this one small act of kindness. I'm in deep. If anybody finds out, I meant to drive home, but I drunk all of it now. Not sobering up, we just sit on the couch. One thing led to another, now she's kissing my mouth. I need you, darling, come on, set the tone. If you feel me falling, won't you let me know? If you love me, come on, get involved. Feel it rushing through you from your head to toe.
guys ready? Welcome. So happy to see a full room for our annual State of the Industry presentation. My name is Carlotta Mast, and I am the Executive Director of Content and Insights at the New Hope Network. And It's really special for me to be here on the stage today. This is my 8th State of the Industry presentation here at Expo West. And actually, I started at New Hope 8 years ago when I was, starting as the editor-in-chief of Nutrition Business Journal. So it's unbelievable the change we've seen in the industry over those 8 years. And I always look forward to this presentation. My mom always calls me right before Expo, and she knows I'm going to be doing this, and she says, well, what's the state of the industry? And she's like, oh, wait, don't tell me. It's really strong, I know. Things are going really well for your industry. And every year, even during the recessionary years, even during the Great Recession, our industry was still strong. We still were experiencing great growth, even when other industries were really challenged and shrinking. So it's been great to be part of this, but when I think about this year and where we are at Expo West 2016, I don't think the state of our industry has ever been stronger. We certainly have some places where we're challenged. For example, the dietary supplement category is still facing some challenges. We're also in the natural retail channel, we're feeling some challenges, and we'll talk about that a little bit more today. But overall, the state of our industry is very strong, and I think if you're looking for innovation, inspiration, and integrity within the food and CPG world, this is the place to be. So again, I'm Carlotta Mast, I'm with the New Hope Network, and I'm here with 3 other amazing researchers and presenters in the natural products industry, and we have a lot of data and insights to share with you today. I'm joined by my colleague, Eric Pierce, who is the Director of Business Insights at New Hope Network, as well as by our friends and research colleagues, Mary Ellen Molyneux, who is the President and Managing Partner at NMI Natural Marketing Institute, and also Steve French, who is the Managing Partner at NMI Natural Marketing Institute. So I'm going to start with some numbers, what everybody wants to know as we head into Expo West. What's happening in the industry? Where are we seeing growth? Maybe where are we seeing challenges? And what's expected for tomorrow? So overall, the U.S. natural products industry, which we track as including food and beverage, supplements, and natural living, grew 9.5% to almost $180 billion in 2015. And as you can see from this slide, the green section, that represents food and beverage. So food and beverage continues to make up the lion's share of sales in our industry. And this includes natural, organic, and functional food and beverage sales. And I see a lot of people taking pictures of the slides, which is great, but we would love to, if you were scanned when you came in, we're going to send out this deck to everyone who's attending, so you'll have the data, and you can still take pictures and tweet it out if you'd like, but we're definitely going to share the data. Good, yeah, it's good data. And use it in your business plans and to help others understand how strong this market is. Something else I wanted to share with you in terms of some changes we're seeing in the data. In addition to just tracking sales at Nutrition Business Journal, we also look at how each sales channel performs. And so we track natural channel retail, mass market retail, kind of the direct-to-consumer channels. And once again in 2015, the mass market retail dominated. So in 2015, 57% of sales of natural, organic products happened in the mass market channel, which probably isn't surprising to you given the changes that we're seeing in the retail landscape. This is creating challenges for our independent retailers who are facing an ever-complex, ever-competitive retail landscape. But overall for the industry, it's just resulted in a lot of growth for our brands. In 2015, the mass market channel also grew a little bit more quickly than the natural channel, 11% compared to 10%. And the fastest growing channel, which also probably isn't surprising, was internet. Still makes up only about 3% of our industry sales, online sales, but was growing at almost 15%. Now, let's just look at natural and organic food and beverage sales. So this was the strongest, this is the largest category in terms of all of the categories we track, and had really strong growth of 10.7% to $67.2 billion in 2015, according to Nutrition Business Journal estimates. And this is combined natural and organic. So you might be wondering, how does this, how does natural sales compare to organic sales? And what we've found is that organic now it's a larger category. It's about 35 billion of these sales, and it grew just a little bit more quickly than natural sales in 2015. So organic is doing very, very well and very strong. You could compare that to, during the recession, we actually saw the natural channel sales growing faster than organic, but that's definitely been flipped, and we're seeing organic once again growing very strong. U.S. functional food and beverage sales. So a functional food is a product that has been fortified with a nutritional ingredient. It would be like maybe an orange juice that includes calcium, or a milk product that includes omega-3s. And functional food and beverage sales are still pretty strong, grew almost 7% to $54.6 billion in 2015. But the functional food and beverage category is now smaller than the overall natural and organic category, and we're seeing a little bit slower growth compared to natural and organic, in part because some of these really important categories like protein-fortified foods, over the last few years, those have really been growing sales. And in 2015, we did see some of that sales growth slow a little bit. We've also seen, there was this wave of protein-fortified products that hit the market, and some of those now are being discontinued, and we're seeing a little bit of pullback from those types of fortified products. An example is Campbell's recently discontinued their V8 protein line, just because they wanted to focus on other categories. A place where we actually see some really important growth now is in probiotic infused functional foods and beverages. So that's likely to help keep the growth at least within the 7 to 8% range for functional foods and beverages. Now this slide is one that I think really demonstrates what's happening in kind of conventional retail right now. So this is comparing natural, organic, and functional food sales to total food and beverage sales. So the teal line represents total food and beverage sales. So still, you can see the green is natural, organic, and functional. It's still a relatively small piece of the pie, but it's growing at a much faster rate than total food. And what's interesting is this is, I think, reflected in our conventional grocery stores, maybe the Krogers and Targets and Safeways of the world, where you're seeing less space now retailers are taking space from conventional products and actually growing their natural and organic and functional sets, because that's where the consumer demand is and where we're seeing growth. So I anticipate that we'll continue to see that green bar continue to grow rapidly, and within not too long, we'll see it become an even more sizable part of the market. So let's switch to supplement sales. Now, supplements is a category, it's very important to this overall industry, and it's one where there have been some challenges in recent years, particularly in 2014 and 2015, with some of the negative media and negative research that was coming out about dietary supplements. The category is still under some of that pressure. I mean, it's amazing, still growing at 6.2% in 2015, despite these challenges, and this was up from growth in 2014, but it still lags where we're seeing natural and organic and even functional foods and beverages. The two categories that are probably still under the most pressure with dietary supplements are multivitamins and omega-3s. We're still even seeing sales of omega-3s in some negative territory due to some of the media and research that's come out, which is, it's surprising, and it's also a little unsettling given how much positive research there is about omega-3s, but there's a lot of work being done to really kind of shore up consumer education around this very, very important category. Now, a bright spot for dietary supplements, which might be a little surprising given some of the media that came out in 2014 and 2015 and the New York Attorney General's kind of attacks on the herb and botanical category, is that sales of herbs and botanicals are actually quite strong, and it's now nearly a $7 billion category. This grew nearly a little over 8%, and so they're outpacing overall dietary supplements, which is pretty amazing. And where we're seeing this particularly strong in herbs and botanicals is with combination herb products that are, formulated for specific health conditions. And we're seeing that sales of these combination herb products, particularly in the mass channel, are doing very, very well. And one hypothesis for why this is, at this conference and at EXPO West, we're going to be talking a lot about consumer trust because it's such an important factor for us as an industry to be looking at. But when we look at some consumer trust research that we've done, we've actually found that OTC products tend to have the lowest trust profile of supplements, pharmaceuticals, and OTC. And this is definitely, with combination herb products, this is a category where consumers it looks to be turning to these herbal products before they're turning to OTCs. And the success of a brand like Zarbee's, which has herbal cold and flu medication specifically for, or products specifically for children, this looks to be a place that is really benefiting from that. Now, natural living sales, so we categorize natural living as including natural beauty, natural personal care, and pet products. And this was our fastest growing category in 2015. It's still the smallest category, but it's now $18 billion in sales in another strong year of growth. And we'll share some additional data throughout this presentation that really indicates that this category is poised for continued strong growth and expansion. So now we're going to turn our attention to some macro forces. So those are the numbers, but what's happening behind these? Why are some of these categories doing so well, others not doing as well? And what's really changing for the consumer that's helping to keep this industry growing at nearly double digits? And we're going to share 3 macro forces that at New Hope Network that we track and really use as a lens to look at what's happening with product trends and consumer trends in the marketplace. We're going to start with the ancient wisdom macro force, which is one that's really important because it really shows why we've grown to where we are today and what's happening in the market now. We're also going to explore a macro force that we call rehabilitation of science. And this one is important because this shows for us some new interesting opportunities for the marketplace that many in this room might not yet even be considering for where we could go in the future. And our third macro force is called the values shopper macro force. And this is very important because really for the first two to actually coincide with one another, they have to be aligned in terms of the changing expectations and values of consumers today. So I'm going to start with ancient wisdom. Ancient wisdom is a macro force. If you've been to any of these State of the Industry presentations, I'm sure you've heard us talk about this, but this is, I think, the most powerful macro force, in addition to our transparency macro force that is really having an impact on the market today. And this is really being driven by an awakening of the consumer. And more consumers, as their trust in the products they buy perhaps wanes a little bit, they're paying more attention. They're reading food labels, they're actually doing research, and they're scrutinizing their buys, their food purchases and their purchases of other products that they might bring into their household or put on their bodies. And what they're doing is they're looking for products that really get back to a simpler way, a kind of a pre-industrialized food system and product system that really focuses on whole, nutrient-dense ingredients and a closer to nature approach to processing. And you'll see so many of the brands that are exhibiting here at Natural Products Expo that are deeply aligned with this macro force. And these are just some of the trends that we track that really we think are connected to this macro force of ancient wisdom. We're going to talk about the ones that are in yellow now. And again, we think this is an important macro force because it's really driving a lot of the growth we see today. So quickly, just a few of the trends that are really important to this ancient wisdom is this new interest in natural fats. So consumers are no longer afraid of all fats, and they're increasingly looking for plant-based sources of fats, such as coconut and avocado, and you'll see a lot of coconut and avocado on the show floor. But they're also looking for new kinds of animal-based sources, such as lard or duck fat that provide nutrition and satiety. And one of the most interesting new products is this new duck fat from Epic Provisions, that they want to do products that actually use all of the animal, and so they're launching new products, and one is this line of duck fat. Another trend that is very much connected to ancient wisdom is something, are two trends that we're combining here, but it's this increased interest in superfoods, which have been around for a long time, but we're seeing lots of evolution within the superfood trends. And one place where we're seeing a lot of evolution is around products that are incorporating superfoods that might be adaptogenic herbs, because more and more folks are looking for products that will help them deal with stress and stress management. And a lot of these adaptogenic herbs, such as this mushroom hot cacao mix, which offers, chill out vibes with reishi mushrooms, is a great product that offers those kinds of benefits in kind of a superfood format. And finally, the last trend that we're combining and we think is really connected to ancient wisdom is this increased interest in fermented foods. And with the benefits of probiotics now widely accepted, consumers are looking beyond dietary supplements and yogurt toward fermented foods and beverages for products with digestive health benefits. And vinegar-based products are one that are doing particularly well on this front, and I think you'll see a lot of new vinegar-based products launched here at this expo, because not only do these products provide those digestive health benefits, but they also tap into this growing consumer interest in products that are less sweet and maybe even have a savory taste profile. And so it's a hot trend for many reasons. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mary Ellen to talk about the consumer attitudes and behavior changes that are driving kind of the why behind these buys.
Thank you, Carlotta, and thank you for having us here today. Just before I start into our data a little bit, I want to qualify it for you. The data that you're going to see this afternoon from NMI is pulled from several of our major databases: health and wellness, sustainability, healthy aging, and supplements, OTC, and prescription. These databases have 17 years of data in them now across more than 1 million consumers and across more than 25 countries. So very comprehensive information, and you're basically going to see the very top of the iceberg. So, but hopefully some insights that will lend as we start to think about what's driving some of these forces, and this one is closer to nature and ancient wisdom, I think, is important as a beginner, because all of the things driving these trends that we're going to talk about this afternoon start with consumers. And consumers are changing. We see that we have an increased number of leader consumers who are the first in, the early adopters, learning, adapting into all kinds of new things. But even the laggards, even the polar opposites of the leaders, are changing, and they're doing more healthy things. So we're seeing the population move up the spectrum, so to speak, and we don't expect it to be a drastic move, but we're seeing a lot of changes in their attitudes and more belief in the credibility of a lot of the things that we're talking about today. And that starts with how consumers are reading labels. They've been driven by information now in the press and that you've made available in your retail stores and so forth, that we see almost 2/3 that say they're reading labels on foods and beverages, and more than half that say that make their decisions based on the ingredient list. And it's not just a US phenomenon. This is really happening across the globe and in developing countries. So from Brazil, China, India, and South Africa, 69 to 90% are making their decisions based on what the ingredients are and what that label is telling them. So the perspective of what they know about your products is really getting deeper and deeper as they experience some new things. And in fact, consumers want more back to nature type of ingredients, as you see here. We ask consumers a couple different questions: what you want more of, what you want less of, and in each of those lists there's 25 to 30 different items that we're always measuring and trending. So whole food ingredients is at 30%, so that's more. Remember, it's more of. It's not 30% using whole food ingredients, it's that 30% still want more than they've already got. 21% want more organic ingredients. And then watch how we watch some of the new emerging ideas, which you'll see in some of the data that Eric is going to present. Ancient grains, sprouted seeds, from 8 to 14% wanting more of those ingredients. They're really just emerging. While they have certainly some backing, certain brands that are here, a lot of snack brands that have used those ancient grains and seeds and sprouted seeds, they're the ones that are capitalizing on this right away, but we expect to see more of that happen and more growing there. And Carlotta had mentioned fats, and omega particularly. So we see natural fats making a resurgence, and what you have is that consumers, 39% of them want more omega-3s. So what's wrong with supplements? Well, they want it in their diet. And they want more from good fats, from olive oil and almonds and nuts. So the foods that are inherently healthy are becoming more important. In the omega category, what we've actually seen is that the decline is not with some of the new technologies in concentrated formulas, it's with the lower concentration formulas, and that is a distinction to be made as to what's happening in the marketplace there. They also want less trans fat, saturated fat, and just fat overall. It's more than 50% that are trying to reduce their fat in some way. And they're monitoring bad fats in their diet. So they're 1 out of 3 still checking the label for total fat, saturated, trans, and percentage of calories from fat. That's what they were trained to do. So they're still looking at that, but we actually see that the monitoring of fat is actually coming down. And it's not because they're not interested. It's not because they're not going to watch their fat. It's because they expect you to do it right. So they're expecting more healthy things, more healthy ingredients, and they're concerned now, the monitoring has gone very, very high on anything to do with sugar. From total sugar, added sugar, what kind of sugar, how much sugar, they're monitoring everything about sugar, and that is growing dramatically. We talked about stress and adaptogenic herbs, and I think this is a really opportunistic area for the industry. Consumers are really looking for solutions, and consumers of all ages, 77% say that they indicate that relieving their stress would increase the quality of their life. So that is what they're seeking in stress relief. We all know that post-recessionary times are very hard for many people. If you have a job in industry, you're working really hard. You might be doing the job of 2 or 3 people in some companies. And that's not unusual today to hear how stressed out consumers in general are. 33% indicate that their stress levels have gotten worse in the last 10 years, and millennials are even stronger on this. Millennials are more than half of them already say their stress is so very, very high, and they're looking for help, they're looking for solutions. So what we see in the data as we track consumers across their health conditions and what they're using, how they're changing their diets, what they want more of, what they want less of, as we look at all their conditions, we see the interconnectedness of these conditions. And it's something really to think about in your planning, whether you're a retailer or a brand, and no matter what category you're in, to understand how consumers really are faring across all of these. So those stress managers index very high for digestive issues, sleep disorders, or having low energy. As a matter of fact, it's more than 50% of the population that talk that they're trying to manage those 3 conditions. So there's opportunities, and as you think about, Carlotta mentioned condition-specific supplements, condition-specific opportunities, there are opportunities to present solutions across the wide realm of everything that's happening for your customers. So you need to think about it in multiple ways and look at the ancillary areas of their lifestyle and everything that's going on there, and not just one particular issue of digestion. But we'll talk about that because there's some interesting things happening in digestion. For example, when you think about opportunities, it's not just about digestive enzymes anymore. There are some really cool things emerging. 1 in 4, 25% say, I'm looking for ways to remove the buildup in my digestive tract. Now, who would have thought? You know, that was really one of those issues, and detoxifying and any kind of detoxification talk or rhetoric from consumers from years ago was just like, okay, we were talking about in the low single digits. But now we've got 1 in 4 that say, if I could see a claim on a product that said this product would cleanse my digestive tract, I'm more likely to buy it. So we look at that and look at some of the other things. I mean, probiotics have been around for a long time, but I think these attitudes that are moving through consumers so quickly now, we're starting to see the opportunities for probiotics across categories. So 42% want more probiotics in their diet. That's up from 12% in 2008. So just in the last 8 years, look at how much that has grown, the desire for probiotics. 17% want prebiotics. And while we know consumers have trouble defining the difference, they know that they're good for them. 19% use probiotic-enriched foods and beverages, and about the same use probiotic supplements. Right on this chart alone is huge opportunity. If 42% want more, why are we missing? Why are we not messaging to them correctly? Something's missing in how we're talking to them, but there's huge opportunity across categories that's going to continue to grow as the credibility of probiotics continues to increase. And I think Eric is up.
Great. Thank you very much. First off, you know, what an exciting industry this is. There's so much opportunity in this space, and this year I think it's really exciting to talk about this opportunity, maybe in a new way, all right? In some ways, I think this industry is reaching a very exciting tipping point of its own. So what I wanted to do today is I wanted to continue the conversation that we're having about the macro forces and the trends that are really adding a lot of energy and inspiration and growth and innovation to the industry right now. But I wanted to do it from the perspective of which of these trends are most likely the emerging trends that are most relevant right now within the natural retail channel, among the most food-forward progressive shoppers, and which are the ones that are really helping to grow our industry into the mainstream consumer base right now, right? Part of what's so exciting about this tipping point for the industry is this potential to grow with the mainstream consumer who increasingly is finding the values of this industry, the values that this industry has grown for 40 or more years on, becoming more relevant to mainstream consumers. So what I want to do today is I want to share with you a methodology and then the results of an analysis that we've just completed that give us some insight into which of the trends we're talking about today are really resonating with mainstream consumers. We're going to look at the macro forces, we're going to look at individual trends, and then concepts that we've tested in a database. So what we're going to do in order to do this is we're going to use a methodology that we at New Hope use. Every month we test 40 concepts. We look for inspiration from this industry, from the shows, from the press releases that we see coming out from innovators in this space, and we test 40 concepts a month. We test these concepts based on 2 basic metrics: purchase intent and likelihood to succeed in the marketplace. Each of these concepts is tested against 1,000 consumers from the general population. So we carefully pick 1,000 people each month to participate in this survey, and they're designed to represent the mainstream consumer, because what we want to do is begin to help this industry grow into the new population of mainstream consumers who are increasingly finding relevance in these ideas. So what I'm going to take you through today is a 2x2 analysis, and then we're going to dive in and talk about, you know, each of these and their probability of success with the mainstream population. As with any 2x2, you can look to the upper right-hand corner for sort of where the action is, but I also want to sort of make sure everyone understands that the bottom left here is great as well. The bottom left, if you will, is kind of our emerging concepts, our emerging trends. Right? We're going to see some in that bottom left-hand corner that are probably best suited for now, leveraging the incredible power of our niche marketing system that is built up, right? The retailers that are designed to help the most food-forward consumers find the most progressive new food and beverage and supplement products. The upper right-hand corner is going to suggest which of these concepts are really pushing their way into mainstream consumers. They're going to be the ones that mainstream consumers say, yeah, I would buy that concept in the next 12 months. It'll also tell us which of them consumers think other people would buy a lot more of in the next 12 months. So our 2 axes are purchase intent, I would buy it myself, and I think other people will buy a lot more of this. That's a really important and interesting metric, because what that tells us is beyond just what you would do. Think of a gluten-free product, for example, right? Maybe somebody's experimented with gluten-free and they've said, it's just not for me. I'm not sure I like the flavor profile. I've experimented with the diet, but I don't feel like I need to avoid gluten. But, oh my gosh, my daughter is experimenting with it, or somebody at the water cooler, or I'm always seeing people on Facebook talk about gluten-free. I can see that this is really relevant to other people. So this prediction metric that we have is leveraging the wisdom of the crowd. It's anything and everything that Mr. or Mrs. Mainstream consumer has tapped into themselves that they can use to say, I do believe other people will buy more of this in the future. So what we've got here is the mapping of 7 of the macro forces that we track at New Hope. Ancient wisdom, which you can see is sort of right there in the center. Just really quickly how to read this. The concepts and the trends and the macro forces I'll be showing you today that run across the top, those are the ones with the highest purchase intent. So mainstream consumers, again, saying, yeah, I'd buy that. Those on our right-hand side, those are the ones that we're predicting have the strongest probability of success in market based on this wisdom of the crowd approach to collecting information from consumers. And then now, right through the middle is sort of the center of mass for this industry. The other large dot on this page is transparency. And if you talked with Carlotta, or if you've been to some of these other presentations, you know that transparency and this idea of ancient wisdom, looking to nature for health and wellness, is the center of this industry. And what's exciting to see is those 2 dots are right in the center, which means that the center of our industry is more and more attractive to mainstream consumers. So let's drill down a little bit, right? So we looked at the 7 macro forces. These are 52 different trends that we monitored in this. So just to make sure I'm making connections here, every month, 40 concepts tested. Over the last 2 years, we're now well over 700 concepts tested. For this analysis, I drew the line at about 680 concepts. We coded every single concept into one of 52 trends and one of 7 macro forces. Now we're looking at the aggregated results of these to again see which ones are most relevant to mainstream consumers. This is what the 52 trends look like. These are our ancient wisdom oriented trends. What we see here again, now I've grayed out sort of the other 52 or the ones that aren't there, and we can begin to see where ancient wisdom falls on this map. Natural fats and superfoods, you can see here, those are the ones that have the greatest potential among mainstream consumers. Fermented in vinegar, topics we're really interested in. We think there's a lot of good innovation there. Still maybe more emerging and less immediately relevant to mainstream consumers. And adaptogenic herbs kind of showing for a pretty new concept for most consumers. The idea that adaptogenic herbs is connecting in this way suggests that there's really something here that even though it's an emerging trend for many of us, it also is showing relevance and resonance among mainstream consumers. So now let's drill deeper, right? How is each one of those trends being represented by concepts we've tested in the database? I'm showing you real brands here, but I want to make sure that I caveat something. These are concepts that were inspired by these brands. We do this concept testing for clients, but I'm not showing you any of their results. These are just the ones that we got inspired by at the show. We thought was a really good representation of a trend or something else that was innovative in the industry. And so I'm showing you which brand inspired each of these concepts, but I'm not giving away any proprietary information. So natural fats, as we had talked about. Mary Ellen set up really well for us sort of how consumers are beginning to engage here. What I think is exciting about natural fats is it's almost as if it's an emerging trend and yet scaling to mainstream really quickly. We've only been talking about this in the industry for a year at the most, maybe 2 years around the fringes, I think. But we're seeing mainstream consumers readily willing to adopt this. It's almost as if someone told them that sugar was in fact okay and they could go ahead and eat as much as they wanted. That's what we're saying with fat in some ways, or at least that's the message I think consumers are picking up, is maybe there's something okay here, and that pent-up demand is translating into high market prediction and purchase intent scores. So those 2 scores you're going to see for each one of these concepts up there. Market prediction 93, that is among the strongest. Just to give you a reference, 69 is our average. Anything 75 and above we think is a really strong performer. 40s to 50s is kind of a coin toss in terms of market prediction. And the ones below that, we're not again saying bad, they're just probably more emerging trends that aren't ready for mainstream just yet. Purchase intent at 23%, that's huge. Right, so for food-forward concepts across our 680 concepts, the average is 9%. That translates to about 20 million mainstream consumers buying a product. At 23%, that's well above, that's probably in our top 5%. I think our maximum score so far is scored a 31 in the database. So this idea of the coconut butter, or sorry, the almond butter and coconut oil product connecting to consumers in marketing its natural fat sort of positioning is resonating with consumers. We're seeing Yum or Superfoods concepts of freeze-dried avocados performing well, and even kind of a far out there idea of cooking, household cooking oil and algae oil resonating with consumers. 81% probability of success in market, 11% purchase intent. Just so you know, I'm not showing prices when we do these concepts. Clearly distribution, level of awareness, pricing, all that stuff's gonna impact how well these perform in market, but this is a good representation of mainstream demand. Adaptogenic herbs, what we're seeing here is strong potential for a new concept. If you remember, on average, all the concepts that we tested in this space performed at about average or a little bit below average, but we're beginning to see certain concepts perform well. We did talk a little bit about superfoods, sort of setting up the space. Again, superfoods perform quite well, especially in the drinks and the snacks, the bars and the supplements category. Adaptogenic herbs, though, also showing the ability to resonate. What we learn here when we look at the concepts and how individual concepts perform, though, is that most consumers aren't yet familiar with the idea of adaptogenic herbs. To the extent that a concept connects to the idea of stress or a more recognizable ingredient, those perform well. Little Miracles does well here. They've got ginseng and maca in there. Ginseng's more recognizable ingredient, I think, helps this one perform well. Superfoods and adaptogenic herbs in familiar formats, like Amazing Grass's Super Greens product, also performs well. Force Somatic, which is a great product, doesn't fare quite as well with the mainstream consumer, in part, I think, because it's focusing so heavily on the adaptogenic herbs properties and it's playing a more singular function for consumers. So I think one thing we can learn from this is that if you were marketing an adaptogenic herb product, tap into the more recognizable things in order to tap into the mainstream consumers, use a recognizable format, and again, as Mary Ellen pointed out, connect to that consumer need for help managing stress. Fermented in vinegar is also a really exciting place that we're seeing lots of innovation. Big insight from looking across the kinds of concepts that we have tested here is that probiotics and gut health are the topics that resonate most with consumers. If you're selling a strictly fermented product to mainstream consumers, they're probably not understanding the full benefits beyond probiotics of fermented products. So selling a fermented product right now, when you can talk about the probiotic benefit as the primary message and the other benefits of fermentation as maybe secondary messages, you're gonna do a better job of connecting with the mainstream consumer. This isn't necessarily advice for the natural organic sort of retail set, because I think that consumer is more savvy and educated on this topic. But to connect with the mainstream consumers, make sure you lead heavily with the idea of the probiotic and the gut health properties of fermented foods. Last one on here is Side Road's Switchel product. We were talking about vinegar as a flavor profile. In many ways, this is part of the what's old is new again trend. But we're seeing really very strong probability of success of this within mainstream consumers. As a brand new flavor profile for ready-to-drink beverages, the fact that a vinegar-based beverage is performing as well as it is in this database, I think is really quite promising for that line of innovation.
Thank you, Eric. So that was ancient wisdom as a macro force. Now we're going to go all the way over to the other end of our macro force spectrum to explore a macro force that we call rehabilitation of science. And the reason we chose to focus on this today is because in many ways, as I noted, this is kind of the opposite of ancient wisdom, which is in some ways sort of a moving away from industrialized food science. The brand Back to the Roots, I think, represents it best when they talk about undoing food, getting back to really simple food again. The rehabilitation of science is where we're seeing, the use of new food technologies to create new product benefits for new consumer benefits. And we see a lot of potential there for this industry, as long as we kind of make sure that our values are aligned with what we're trying to do. Another reason we're very interested in the rehabilitation of science macro force is because it represents sort of a new alignment of values for science in this industry. So rather than just using food science for corporate profit, it's finding ways to use food science to really address big societal challenges, such as just how do you feed a growing global population. So we really kind of define the rehabilitation of science as, again, the role of food science is being reframed to embrace the spirit of natural products while addressing societal concerns. It's a pivot that moves toward rebuilding consumer confidence and trust in food science. And again, we're seeing lots of interesting new opportunities here. And these are just some of the trends that we track that are connected to this macro force of rehabilitation of science. We'll talk about the ones today that are in yellow. The first one is HPP. And I'm sure you know about HPP, and it was kind of launched in the juice category in this industry, but it's not just for juice anymore. It's being used as more nutrient-friendly, less processed alternative to high heat pasteurization. And right now, in addition to juice, we're seeing that the baby food category is one that is employing this new technology to bring more nutrient quality and freshness to a product set. Green chemistry is another important trend that is connected to this rehabilitation of science. And of course, when it comes to what we consume or what we buy and put on our bodies or use in our homes, there's a growing fear of chemicals that is causing people to prefer the imagery of aprons over lab coats. And again, that's what is really driving this ancient wisdom macro force. However, we're seeing some companies, some really innovative companies that are figuring out how to put science to good use in ways that fit with consumers' new preferences for clean and more natural products. One that I would point out here is Scotch Naturals. It's a new line of more natural nail polish that is salon quality but gets rid of all of the endocrine disrupting chemicals that are found in traditional nail polishes, but it actually performs like a salon quality product. And finally, a trend that we think is really important is one that we at the New Hope Network have kind of coined as Nourish Tech. And this is really what we use to call this whole food tech movement. And what's interesting about this trend is that in addition to, in our industry, lots of investment money is flowing into companies that kind of align with our ancient wisdom trends. But we're finding that a lot of tech money and money in Silicon Valley is really flowing toward more of these food tech companies that not only are introducing new technologies, but many of them are introducing them with this prospect of actually fixing food to solve a larger societal problem or address a big consumer need. And these are just some of the companies you see some of them here at EXPO, such as Beyond Meat. But one interesting new food tech company that we think falls into this Nourish Tech trend is a biotech startup in Silicon Valley called Clara Foods. And they're using new synthetic biology technology to create an egg yolk that doesn't require chickens as a way to actually address our big industrialized poultry situation in this country, which it was an environmental disaster for the world. And so again, this is a GMO 2.0 technology, but they actually have an intention behind the use of that technology that many in this industry might actually be able to get behind. And unlike some of the other biotech companies out there or GMO companies, they want to bring a level of transparency to the use of this technology so that people can really understand the intention and use and why they're using this technology. So it's going to bring up a lot of interesting discussion for our industry, and also hopefully some new views on how we could potentially use biotechnology for great good in the world.
So while we talk about corporations being more transparent, whether we're talking about food or supplements or any other category, personal care and otherwise, consumers want transparency and new science, but sometimes they remain very skeptical. So you can see here that 76% say that they believe that most food manufacturers are focused more on profit than they are on health, and only 37% say that the manufacturers are interested in promoting healthy food choices. That's slowly changing. This is certainly just, as more happens and certainly as we have more introductions What you deal with as a brand is going to change as this industry is really having effect on mainstream, and we'll talk about that as we go through today. So we noted earlier that consumers are looking for less artificiality in their foods. So when we think about the rehabilitation of science, especially for major iconic brands today, some of them have been spending years on taking out the bad ingredients, artificial sweeteners, preservatives, colors, flavors, MSG, now GMOs. They're working on it, and you're going to see some proliferation of products now being able to come into the marketplace because of new science, because of new ingredients, because we have a plethora now, just one example, a plethora of natural flavors and natural colors. So a lot is going to be continuing to happen, and consumers will become even more demanding that the rest of the world, the rest of the manufacturers, take it out of their food. If General Mills can take it out of their cereal, they think anybody can. But let me tell you, it wasn't an easy thing to do. When you talk about sourcing, you talk about the mechanics of your formulation and how things work together, all of it becomes really important. But we do have more mainstream companies listening. So when you see what happened, Kraft took out artificial color out of their iconic mac and cheese. Who thought they'd ever mess with it? General Mills took out artificial color, flavors, and reduced the sugar. We're going to continue to see more. Restaurants like Taco Bell and Panera committing to no hormones, no antibiotics, no artificiality. Nestle advertising no artificial colors or flavors. Campbell's revamping their entire line, looking at their across all of their products. How much more can they do in organic? Where can they take artificiality out? We're just going to continue to see more and more mainstream companies doing this, which is a great thing, isn't it? Isn't it exciting? This little industry has affected big industry. I'd love to see that. So it's an exciting time as we think about science. And I talked about this a little bit in the APA member meeting this morning. As you start to think about what companies can do and what you can do with your science, as the natural products industry, we need to be talking about science a whole lot more. We're not talking about it enough, folks. We need to continue building our credibility by bringing in credible science that we're in agreement with, that makes sense for consumers, that makes sense for your product line, and is true to the values that we've been looking for some time. I think HPP is one of those opportunities, when we talk about, well, what happens to this industry if big mainstream industry starts doing everything we're doing? Well, we've always been pioneers, and we're always ahead of the game. There is a group of consumers, we call them well-beings, they're the leader group. They are always looking for what's new. HPP is a process that is just part of the solutions there, something that we can bring to first. You know that 1 in 4 already indicate that they are somewhat to very familiar with high-pressure pasteurization. That's a good thing. So it's top 2 box that they get it. They're a little bit familiar with it. And here's what they understand about it. Mostly it's about killing bacteria. Otherwise, it's about maintaining the quality of the product, maintaining the shelf life, preserving the product nutrients, or that I can have this product now with no additives or preservatives. Only 18% said that they didn't know any benefits. So HPP is promising as a methodology, a technology that we can use across the board and across categories. We see this hierarchy when we think about the rehabilitation of science, and we talk a lot about foods and beverages, but it really goes across categories. So I want to talk just for a minute about chemicals and consumers' fear of chemicals and how they think about that. They have a hierarchy that starts with themselves. What goes in me and what goes on me. That's the first thing I'm concerned about. Then I become concerned with my household, my family, my home. And I start looking around there. And I'll think about your experience within natural and organic products. Where did you start? What made you start? I would bet my last bottom dollar. It starts with in me, on me, something you were concerned about, that you got concerned about using because of something you learned. Now you progress, and you progress across categories because you're thinking about your kids, and you're thinking about your household and the products you use in your household. And then as you continue to grow, you think more about your community, and what do I do in my community, and how are these things affecting my community? How's water runoff affecting the water quality in my community? And then it goes to my country and my world. It's only about 20% of the population that get as far out as the world. That's the leader group. They're the only ones that really truly get there, but the rest are hearing about it, and they start to think about these hierarchies of their concerns, and what you start to see is opportunities, because any kind of chemical connotes toxic for consumers. So the question today is there room for green chemicals, for green chemistry? What is that? What does it mean? What are the benefits? What are the features? What are the particulars that we could do with green chemistry? 70% believe that reducing toxins in their body is critical to staying healthy. How can we help them? 64% say natural cleaning products are healthier for me. And over half say that they're concerned about chemicals and the relationship to childhood diseases. So there's lots of opportunities to meet the needs for consumers here as we really start to think about green chemicals and where that goes. But it's not just food and beverage. I mean, it's household cleaning, as you just saw. It's personal care. 46% are concerned about the chemicals in personal care products. That's up from 39% just 3 years ago. It's continuing to grow. In agriculture, 42% say, I care about reducing the use of pesticides, herbicides, and chemicals in agriculture. That's up from 32% in 2006. And I'm concerned about the chemicals in laundry products. Now, a third of consumers are talking about their laundry products. So they're talking about food and beverage, they're talking about laundry, they're talking about personal care. Can you see it kind of moving outward? In, on, home, family, community, country, world. So they're really moving through this, and it creates a lot of opportunities for us as we think about the products. And as we think about the science that goes along with this, I'm going to encourage you to embrace science, to embrace the true parts of science that are really going to prove how credible this industry is and how much more we can do. And I think Eric's going to show you some more about how this works out in some product ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take a look at how these things resonate with mainstream consumers, right? I think one of the most exciting topics is Nourish Tech. Unfortunately, I don't have concepts in my database yet to show you exactly how this Nourish Tech performs among mainstream consumers, but we can talk about rehab of science and take a look at HPP and the green chemistry trends that we're talking about today. You know, what's really exciting in many ways is mainstream consumers are ready for this idea of a little bit more science in their food or their home care goods or whatever. Again, as everyone else has said so far, you have to be really careful because the word food and science don't necessarily go together very well for most consumers. Again, you know, has that been in service of profit and maybe at the expense of human health and social health? But there are concepts in our database that are beginning to resonate in a way with consumers that can be important. Here's how the trends within rehabilitation of science sort of break out. Again, sort of our blue dots on the page here being the ones relevant to this space. Green chemistry actually showing that there is a real demand. Just like Mary Ellen showed us, there is demand for consumers to have these cleaner versions of our personal care products, our home care products, and so on. HPP, maybe not as ready for mainstream consumers. Mary Ellen pointed out that 1 in 4 were familiar with it. I think that's part of what's being reflected here. A little bit more of the emerging trend right now. But again, averages always disguise the true variation in something. So when we actually look at the results for HPP, we do learn that there are places where we can begin to connect HPP to the mainstream consumers. Increasingly, we know that consumers want to know where their food came from. They want to understand how it was made, which is giving us the opportunity to talk about methodologies, right? How does something actually made? And HPP falls into that. So consumers are willing to hear about that from us now and interested and maybe even in many cases demanding it. They want to avoid preservatives, right? We also know that they're looking for whole, less processed foods. And HPP is the science that can enable us to bring them that fresher, less preservative or no preservative foods. And what we're seeing here is that when HPP sort of meets with a familiar format where people are really thinking about nutrients and are open to the idea with Evolution Fresh in the juice category that really brought HPP to market, we're seeing pretty good performance, you know, about a little bit above average in terms of the market prediction, a little bit above average in terms of purchase intent. But what's really exciting is the more emerging concepts, right? So HPP, I think, is going to allow us to bring more and more products to consumers that meet that need for whole, for fresh, for less processed, for less preserved. And we're seeing some exciting products that are a little bit more niche right now. Emerging ideas like the Evoke smoothie bowls and their HPP processing on that. I think that's going to take a little bit more time for consumers to adopt some of the new concepts that can be brought to market because of this technology. So Evoke and Juice actually performing quite well, especially if you think about those being primarily products in the natural channel where you can find a targeted audience much more easily. Green chemistry, we saw already had much more relevance among mainstream consumers. We can see that here, the idea of high performance products without the chemicals that people are concerned about, without the sulfates, without the parabens, the phthalates, the synthetics, the nanotechnologies, if you will, are resonating with consumers. Raw Elements has a non-nano zinc sort of sunscreen product that performs very well among mainstream consumers. Even some of the more out there concepts like Dairy Face. This is a probiotic yogurt-based skin cream that you get out of the refrigerated section. Finding relevance with mainstream consumers because of what it's not and because of what it is all at the same time. So again, 10% purchase intent among mainstream consumers, significantly above average market prediction at 74 for some of these emerging concepts.
Thank you, Eric. So on to our last macro force, which we call the values shopper. And what's happening is consumers are increasingly moving beyond price as their single purchasing filter as a new and complex world of values now influences purchasing decisions. And the reason we think that this is such an important macro force is because we believe that for ancient wisdom and the rehabilitation of science to coexist, there has to be an alignment with the new changing consumer values and beliefs. And when there is that alignment, you could actually begin to incorporate new forms of food science and green chemistry and other types of science into products in a way that really fits with consumer values. So again, these are some of the trends that are connected to the value shopper macro force, and we'll talk about the ones that are in yellow. Probably my favorite trend, and one that is the reason I love to walk the show floor at Expo West, is the trend of mission-based brands. And more you're seeing companies that are launching brands that really help consumers do good with their purchasing power. So these brands stand for something more than just the product, which is very much in alignment with what consumers now expect. They expect a great product, but they also expect something more from that brand. And we're seeing some really great innovative companies that are building mission and purpose into the DNA of their companies. These are just a few examples of companies that are were started first and foremost to fulfill a mission. Oftentimes it's an environmental or social or health-focused mission. And around that, they've created a really great product that can enable them to achieve that mission. Another trend that is really aligned with this values shopper macro force is something that we're calling repurposed ingredients. And as consumers are beginning to become more and more concerned with food waste, we're seeing companies that are challenging the perception of waste in their own products. And they're finding really clever and innovative ways to reduce the waste stream and give new life to byproducts and waste materials. One that I'll point out here is the new Sir Kensington's Fabinaise. And this is a vegan mayo that uses something called aquafaba, which is basically the liquid that is used to brine chickpeas as the egg replacer in this new vegan mayo. And they get this aquafaba from a partnership that they formed with a hummus company. So they're able to take this liquid, use that aquafaba to create a vegan mayo. So really great example of a brand that is repurposing ingredients for an innovative new product. And finally, there is, as we've talked about, there's a growing interest in protein and protein rich products, but no longer consumers wanting just any protein source. Increasingly, they're wanting to be more selective about that protein. And they're looking for, if they're looking for an animal-based protein, they're looking for grass-fed or pasture-raised proteins. And more consumers are actually looking for plant-based proteins as they're, attempting to get more protein, but also find these sources that are more ethical and sustainable.
All right, well, thanks, Carlotta. I think this final macro force, really is bringing everything together here. And as was mentioned, it's all about this interconnectedness. And if you think of societal cultures and norms and attitudes and behaviors and psychographics and demographics and why consumers do things and don't do things and on and on and on, as we all try and study consumer behavior, what you see here is not only the interconnectedness with the first two macro forces, but also the interconnectedness of what we typically think about within this industry and lots of other industries is the whole notion of personal health. And so what we're doing here is providing that connection point between personal health and planetary health. And whether it's that alignment of consumer values, you could definitely say there's the alignment on a B2B basis. So those of you across the supply chain, if you're an ingredient supplier and you're working with customers, if you're a manufacturer and you're working with retailers, there's a much higher likelihood to want to do business with somebody that's aligned with your values, aligned with your morals, aligned with your ethics. So you can take that on a B2B or a B2C basis. But if you just take a look at some of the numbers here, if we think about the reasons consumers purchase, and I'll just use food and beverage for example, consumers have always purchased food and beverage for four major reasons: taste, convenience, price, and nutrition. That will never change. Now, there's been some shift among those four different areas, but what's adding to that equation is this whole notion of values. And values means different things to different folks, but how we measure it is really linking in what Mary Ellen had talked about and what Carlotta was referencing in terms of the integration of the first two macro forces into things talking about the world, the environment, people, something of what I'd call a higher order benefit. It's not just about taking a particular product and ingesting it or putting it on your body. It's about thinking about where the products came from. It's thinking about a variety of different dimensions, which I'll cover on the following slides. And I think what's also important on the second chart here, as we see the increase of consumer interest, and you can see many, many examples out there in terms of consumers connecting through a pathway to companies that are very active on the social side. We spend a lot of time on the nutrition side. We spend a lot of time on the environmental side, but it's very important with that social aspect that we'll talk about more here too. So when we look at this macro force, and if we look at any macro force or any trend, the question always comes up, well, I wonder if consumers are willing to pay more for it. And there's lots of particular examples. Carlotta mentioned orange juice fortified with calcium, for example. For those of you that were in the market 15 years ago or whenever products were first launched, you may recall that orange juice was launched. It was fortified with calcium, and there was a price premium associated with it. Well, it failed miserably, and so it had to be parity priced with regular non-fortified orange juice for it to succeed. So this whole notion of consumers wanting no sacrifice is a very, very important. However, you do have a slight pricing willingness to pay more for various different dimensions, whether it be on the social side, dealing with paying workers or safe working environments. Then we get into product attributes, which are listed back, such as being USDA certified organic, those that are GMO-free, those that are environmentally preferable, and lastly, those that are doing something about global warming. In the higher sense, again, as you get into this notion of moving from what's in me, on me, to my greater world. So it's this, a good term to talk about and actually refer to the space that we're in here now is mindfulness. And that may be something to capture. You can use it in messaging or terminology or whatever it might be. But it's just keeping into account that, again, across the supply chain, yes, consumers don't necessarily understand how the product is made and in terms of the minute details, but they want to know, especially as it deals with people, how these products were made, and as some of the social issues are noted here. Now, there is some skepticism, there is some cynicism in the marketplace, and one of the ways that this has been overcome is through providing seals and certification and proof. The best example of this, and these are just a small number of seals and certs that we've been tracking for decades. The best example is Energy Star. Yes, it's a little bit outside of what we're talking about here. I think most of you could understand what it is. To some, it's better for the environment. To others, it saves money. But whatever it is, it's a good example of a government voluntary program that has gained consumer momentum. Then you start to see things such as General as the recycled logo. You get into reduce, reuse, recycle. Then USDA certified organic. You almost have 4 in 10 saying they're more likely to purchase a product that has this particular label. And there's a host of others. We get into fair trade, Rainforest Alliance, UL Environment, as they expand outside of some of their typical space that they've been in for many, many decades. I think most of you probably heard of MSC, Marine Stewardship, Forward Stewardship Council. You can look at FSI or PEFC, and there's a host of others. But these seals and certifications, again, help consumer confidence in making a choice about the force that was related to ancient wisdom of transparency, which if you really try and understand what that means, consumers are saying what's in my stuff. And my stuff is a very complicated marketing term, but it's basically relevant to whether it's a food, whether it's toxins coming off a carpet, what's happening with my apparel, whatever it might be. It's very, very relevant, very, very macro. So this notion of transparency is definitely a global phenomenon. I think when you look at the numbers here, you can see some significantly high impacts here, and the impacts are really twofold. They're impacting the perceptions of a particular company, and they're increasing loyalty. Both those dimensions are obviously fundamentally important in any successful marketing plan. Again, looking at those particular numbers, you can see some of the emerging markets, the brick markets on the right-hand side there, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, that are really starting to embrace some of these transparency values. So consumers are definitely looking for more solutions for environmentally friendly conscious products. You have half of America, half of American adults, 120 million consumers or so, saying, I feel more personally responsible today about protecting the environment. Now that's all well and good, although you do ask the question, I wonder what the other 50% feel. But if you just focus in on that, and you get a little bit more specific, and you say, what can I do? Again, regardless of where you are in terms of a company, in terms of the supply chain, consumers want to know. They wish they did more. You have half a consumer say, I want to do more and be environmentally friendly. It's the right thing to do. It makes me feel good. It aligns with my values, all the things that we've already talked about before. And they'd like more information. The key to supplying consumers in order to help them be the enablers is to make it simple, make it easy to understand, make it relevant, and make it meaningful. So, the biggest change in behavior in the entire environmental movement is taking a bag into a grocery store. If you look at some of those trends, there's lots of things happening, but consumers want to do more. So if you can help them do more in whatever form or fashion, it's a win-win for everybody. We could spend the whole session talking about food waste. We can talk about the 9 billion people in the world, and we can talk about 1 billion per day are malnourished. Then we take a look back at the US, and we know that 35%, which is the latest estimate, of everything that goes through the supply chain ends up in waste. Now that waste stream goes in a variety of different places, but here you see half of America stating that food they threw away because it went bad. Now, this is not equated back to volume. This could be one head of lettuce or an entire a selection of products. But the point is that there's a significant amount of waste happening here. So consumers are trying to be more environmentally friendly. They're recognizing that what's happening in landfills. They're recognizing what's happening in terms of environmental impact. So we see an increase in behavior in terms of composting, not only garden and yard waste, but also kitchen and food waste. There's lots of big initiatives underway to sort of bring that into an easier fashion to do. So actually bring it from having to do outside to inside, and a whole range of exciting things happening there. Now, the other thing that ties together based on all the content we've talked about in the past hour or so is not only protein, but the fact that we will be unable to feed the world's supply or the world's population of animal-based protein sources based on current consumption levels if they continue the way they are in the next 15 years. Therefore, we obviously see a big growth in plant-based proteins. You can see 40% of general population Americans stating that they've used a plant-based protein in the past three months. That number's up significantly from years and years ago. You can see that soy protein continues to be a big part of that market, but a lot of the growth is coming from other areas. It's coming from pea protein, oat protein, and on and on. There's lots of different sources there. There's lots of innovation in terms of some vegetable protein sources through some innovation. Then it's also important to recognize that not only do you have plant-based options that consumers are still using, some animal-based, and I just put two different examples here to compare and contrast something that's more mainstream, such as a whey protein, used by about 1/4 compared to, and I think most of you have probably heard about protein sources. It's obviously a little bit of a polarizing topic, but it is one of the most sustainable sources of protein as it stands today. The simple analogy to other types of industry, whether it's flooring or clothing, is bamboo. You know, it grows quickly, it requires little amount of water and inputs and so on. So lots of fun things happening here in the world of proteins. The last slide I want to touch on is back to the wheel of the macro force here, and it's just as we take a look at upcoming trends and spend time with clients, you know, we're looking at the transfer of awareness to attitudes, attitudes to behavior, and behavior to loyalty. And as consumers move through that purchase pathway, what we see here is we track awareness of all kinds of specific terms. And there's a range of things happening here. So this is just a short list of many terms that we cover here. But the point is that upcycling, for those of you that are familiar with that particular term, has grown in awareness 146% since 2011, which basically means I'm taking a product that's no longer being used and I'm putting it back into the supply chain as a usable product. The example here is taking the apparel industry and taking a particular type of product within the apparel industry, which are denim jeans, which, oh, by the way, have the worst environmental impact of not only sourcing, but using, such as washing, and then what do you do with them afterwards? What is happening here is we're turning them into other things. In this particular case, it's a handbag. Same thing happens with foil pouch packaging. You can turn them into a whole variety of different things. For years and years, taking gallon jugs of milk and turning them into scoopers or whatever it may be. So the point here is you got to think, as we talked before, about the other macro forces of ingredients and so on, but don't forget about, if I have something left, what do consumers think about what they're going to do with it? The other two dimensions of this slide, first is there's lots of specific ingredients, and some of them are related to food and beverage, some of them are related to areas in personal care. So you see big increases in things like parabens or BPA or phthalates or whatever it might be. And then the second point here is consumers prefer specificity. And so, you know, we all talk about the environment and we like to use the word carbon footprint and carbon offsets and things like that. Well, consumers are not resonating with that as much as they have in the past because it's just such an obscure and broad topic. So again, the specificity is very important, as is the notion of repurposing within this macro force. So Eric's going to give us some particular examples here from the concept work.
And just to reconnect you to why we're talking about the value shopper, right? We're talking about it because it is an engine for growth. The themes that we've decided to talk about today are really the themes that we think are driving new innovation and growth within this industry. Transparency of intent has the ability to resonate with mainstream consumers and help further grow this industry by bringing the mainstream consumer into the types of products and ideas and innovations we bring. But transparency of intent also has the opportunity, as Carlotta mentioned, to unify both areas of macro forces we talked about today. The idea of the ancient wisdom, the core of this industry, as well as the potential growth area of the rehabilitation of science, of thinking about how science can further develop and grow this. What we're seeing here is between the trends we've been talking about fall within the value shopper and the feed me concepts. The feed me concepts is all about the environmental sustainability of how are we going to feed the world's population. The value shopper, what we've been talking about. We see that many of these begin to resonate with mainstream consumers again, right? So we've got mission-based brands standing out as the most powerful concept out of all 52 trends. 52 trends. This is the strongest performing trend in our entire database. Strong in purchase intent among mainstream consumers, strong in terms of the market prediction. What we're going to talk about is how compassion resonates with mainstream consumers, despite the skeptics who say this probably isn't important or there isn't something here. We're seeing increasingly mainstream consumers adopting this. We've got the ethical, sustainable proteins also resonating with consumers, and we've got repurposed ingredients up here showing promise, but being sort of more of the emerging trend in this space. So mission-based brands, right? Again, compassion resonates here. For the entrepreneurs in the room, helping consumers understand your reason for being and what you stand for is increasingly resonating not just with the traditional health and wellness or natural and organic retail shopper, but it's connecting with the mainstream consumers. Steve showed numbers that suggested that. These numbers are representing it, right? We've got Marley Coffee, who goes out of their way to redesign the K-Cup to offer up a recyclable product. They also talk about their give back program, their fair trade certifications, 95% probability of success with mainstream consumers, 17% purchase intent. We've got endangered species chocolate and their species conservation sort of mission resonating with consumers. We've got Sunshine Nut Company and their promise to give back 90% of profits to the communities where they harvest, resonating with consumers. So compassion resonates. Repurposed ingredients is maybe a little bit more of our emerging trend right now, but an important one and a powerful one. If you remember some of the numbers that Steve presented, opportunity here to increasingly resonate with mainstream consumers. There are concepts, again, our averages always hide things. There are some concepts that are really connected to food waste, which is increasingly a topic that more and more consumers are being aware of. Here we see full cycle feed. This is a dog food treat that is being made based on the leftovers from restaurant industry, right? The stuff that doesn't get used, that was prepped and what wasn't consumed is going into dog treats here. And this idea is resonating with consumers. That 8% purchase intent might look low, it's about at our average, but just remember, only about 50% of the population owns a pet. And even fewer of them own dogs. So 8% among this broad population suggests that this really does resonate with consumers. Kona Red, a very attractive, sort of interesting product, talking about using the coffee berry, right? The flesh from around the coffee bean that we're all using, recycling, upcycling that product, resonating with consumers. Though there are some niche products. Our editors really love Fat Face as a product, but it's one that's going to take a little bit more time. We've always got those fringe concepts in this industry that are going to do better sort of marketing through the niche channel that we have developed. The idea of rendered fat on your face is something that's going to take a little bit more time for consumers to connect to. I'm absolutely not putting that one down. It is a great product. So, proteins, right? So what really connects with consumers here is the ethical, sustainable. We all know that protein's been a hot topic for consumers. They're now ready for that ethical, sustainable, or plant-based protein. One of the strongest performing concepts out of the 680 in our database to date is this one right here, organic grass-fed meat. It's not quite the highest on purchase intent, but at a 99% likelihood of success in market, mainstream consumers are saying, I'm interested, and I know others are interested in this product. Maple Hill Creamery, similarly strong performer in talking about their grass-fed dairy product. Epic Bar, we saw General Mills get behind Epic and what they're doing with their sustainable sort of agricultural sort of approach to how they're sourcing their meats as being really important and something that's resonating with consumers here. That's not even necessarily the highest performing one, but clearly one that General Mills says we want to get behind and we can support. We also see the plant-based proteins performing very well here, the nut butters, the nut milks, lots of the meat alternatives resonating with mainstream consumers as well. So what I wanted to do, Steve and I wanted to wrap up a little bit and sort of stitch all the pieces together of these different trends and macro forces that we've been talking about. When I look at this data, when I look at the trends that we've been talking about today, what I see is continued strength in this industry. As Carlotta suggested with the numbers, as we've been looking at with the trends, there's momentum here. There's vitality in this industry. This industry continues to be full of opportunity and innovation, and that's exciting, and I'm glad we're all here and a part of it. We also see the industry positioned well for continued growth. We see plenty of opportunities for the innovation and the products and the values and the things that we represent as an industry to resonate with the consumers who've always been here for us, the traditional health and wellness consumer, the traditional retail shop or specialty retail shopper. But we're also seeing these ideas, these values, these things that we stand for as an industry connect with the mainstream consumer in more and more ways. And I hope that we were able to show you that with NMI's data and with our data and the ideas that Carlotta talked about, that we can continue to see the next level of growth for this industry is happening right now as mainstream consumers find the relevance and the values and the products that we're bringing to market. The third area for growth comes from continuing to embrace the diversity that has driven this industry for so long. If we can look for that intersection of science and transparency of intent and values, and we embrace the diversity of the ideas that the new science in this industry can bring to us, we can find ways for ancient wisdom and rehabilitation of science to live together and to fuel further growth still in this industry. So lots of opportunity for growth, traditional consumers and innovation, the mainstream consumers, and then innovation as we adopt the new science in this space.
Yeah, I just wanted to wrap up with two more slides. One is, we started off with the state of the industry, and we see some nice growth. We see growth that's much higher than lots of other industries. But even if you look at it, even in a higher order basis, and we think about all products that have some sort of environmental or nutritional standpoint and so on. We at NMI actually quantified the size of this market and saw just tremendous growth. And what's happening here is when we look outside of the 180 billion that Carlotta referenced before, which are included within the numbers you see here. But when you expand that out, and I mentioned some of these industries before, and they may have not been at the first expo, but they sure are today. You pick things dealing with natural lifestyles and apparel and various types of categories there. I think I predict one day that all these categories will be here represented in some form or fashion, whether it's the renewable energy industry and perhaps when the new addition makes room, we'll have room for alternative vehicles and cars and things like that. But you can see the various dimensions that we talk about when we're talking about the green economy, and as it's really grown from about 200 billion in 2005 to about 661 billion in 2012. The exciting number here is the fact that by 2020 we're talking about a $1.5 trillion industry. It is just huge. It is gigantic. It will impact not only the folks in this room, it'll impact America, it'll impact the globe. So those particular numbers are very, very useful. And just 1 minute of reflection here. Again, we know we all represent different facets of the industry in various different roles and responsibilities and company size and place within the supply chain. But if you take a look at these three forces here and you think about ancient wisdom, for example, as it relates back to transparency, there's also a high link there to innovation. We all need to continue to innovate. If you think about the rehabilitation of science, as Mary Ellen was talking about, one of the most powerful things we need to constantly remind ourselves is that sometimes the world of natural, everybody thinks about it as you're stepping down a little bit and you're giving something up. What we need to do as an industry is reposition that to the total opposite, in that nature is the power. Nature provides the solutions that we need. It provides that driving force of innovation. And lastly, we talked about values. That is the new basis upon which business will be done in this new economy. So we thank you for the time. We will be sending the information out. There will be people at the back collecting cards if you would like more information from either NMI or the New Hope Network. We will be here to answer any questions that you have on a one-on-one basis. There's no session after this. And beyond that, we appreciate your time and have a fantastic show.
Thank you.